right. Okay, so I think I think we are on. Hello, everybody. Excuse the sort of slow start. This is only because I'm just testing out Zoom. Uh, it's kind of a new format because today we're actually going to be bringing in a guest. So if this is your first time watching, my name is Siosi Samuels, and you are tuning into the It Will Come show. This is episode 68, and today we're actually going to be talking about the role of community in businesses and tech during the Depression. And so with that, just give us a few seconds or minutes because we're just waiting for our guests. So I have Anfernee Chansamooth, who's going to be joining us. And there he is. All right.
What's up?
Hey, what's up, Anfernee? Just give me a second. Let's see if we can go into gallery view. And let's see if I can bring you on to share. All right. So yeah, there's both of us. I think that's great. So just for those who are watching, could you please just give for yourself, the usual spiel, an introduction of yourself, and then we'll get right into it. Anfernee.
Oh, I'm seeing.
That's over to you.
Oh, sorry, man. I was trying to share this out through.
Oh,
Facebook.
yeah. That's fine. Of course, for everybody who's watching, feel free to like, share this particular video. Again, if this is your first time tuning in, this is the It Will Come show. We're doing a special edition today where we're inviting a guest, Anfernee Chansamooth, and I'll leave it to him to introduce himself.
Yeah, sure. Hey, thanks for inviting me, George. Glad to be here. So essentially, I'm the learning and community lead for a online bookkeeping company called Bin Ninjas. And my role is to cultivate community, bring our clients together, and also really educate people, small business owners, about how to be financially smart. And we have courses that we offer, and we also provide outsourced bookkeeping services for businesses that are running online. So this conversation around community in a time of crisis is really a hot one, and it's a great one that I'm glad to be sharing my thoughts with you on this. I know we had a great chat about it the other night.
Yes, and how this came about was because we had a chat during one of our PAC hot seat sessions. So if you're unfamiliar with the PAC, it's a productivity accelerator that we've been running for the last 5 years. Anfernee has been a longtime member, and we were just discussing everything that's going on in the world right now, of course, related to COVID-19, to the recession and the incoming depression, which I think the name that's being used now is the Greater Depression. And we'll talk about why. I'll actually share a few articles, and then I'm just going to have a conversation with Anfernee about this because it's a very relevant topic, of course, right? Being able to look back into history, to learn from there, and to see how we can apply it now, and also where community actually comes into the fold. Because as you've heard, Anfernee is doing community and has done a lot of marketing in general, really good with the people side. And I think we're just going to need to know how that actually weaves itself into business and even in the tech side, because you'll see a lot of tech companies actually, talk about the importance of online communities now too. So I'm just going to share my screen. Let's see if we can get this done properly. Cool. So do you see my screen right now? The financial storm is here. Yeah, cool. All right. So this first article I put up simply because it's kind of what also pushed me towards a rant on Instagram about why people need to really pay attention at this point in time, right? And why they need to prepare if they haven't already, right? Like, obviously there have been people who've been preparing for a long time now. I've been knowing that this time was coming, but it doesn't help to tell people well, you're here now, and unfortunately, you're screwed. I still think people are going to want to know what they can do now. So this one article is actually from a video by Robert Kiyosaki. And for those of you who don't know Robert Kiyosaki, he is the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is a really well-known book around just, sort of upping your financial education. very relevant to Bean Ninjas too, right, Anf? In terms of what you guys do. But yeah, this here is essentially just outlining, what's happening right now. There's a guy named Bert Doman, the author of the Wellington Letter. He's also been preaching about what's been happening over the years. And essentially, we now need to, discuss how the crash is going to affect everybody and the role of community. So, Anf, do you want to just maybe start us off with your views, your thoughts on, I guess, the role of community, and especially for Bean Ninjas, right? Because you guys are dealing with finance, wealth, etc.
Yeah. So am I still on mute? Or can you hear me?
No, can't hear you.
Good. All right. So we sit in the world of not personal finances, but business finances. And we've been educating sort of people who have been running online businesses for the last 5 years on understanding their numbers, looking at having regular financial systems in place so then they can get accurate reporting and make decisions based on, where the business is at any point in time, but also forecast forward. And this is very relevant to what's happening right now, because we're starting to see businesses being challenged by, even if they're running an online business, their clients might be local businesses, physical businesses that they're supporting. And, if that business has to shut down, then there's an impact on your revenue or on what you can do. And so what we did a webinar 2 weeks ago on the government funding that's available right now through various stimulus packages. We talked about the Australian market, and then we're doing one for the US market next week. But that's the type of question that comes up. It's when I'm pressed as a business owner, or if my business has a hit because of recession, what are my options? What can I do? And what can I do to prepare? Now, the best answer to that is you should have prepared 12 months ago. But like you say, it doesn't help telling people that now. So what we can do is let's look at what's available to you right now. What tough decisions do you need to make right now? So some companies have to let some of their people go, have to, close down parts of their business that no longer make sense because people just are not buying anymore in those aspects. And then look at, where are the opportunities to pivot and innovate if that's something that's available to you. Okay. And then the role of community in all of this is, what we see are the businesses that survive and thrive through a recession are the ones who have done the groundwork to build a community, who have strong relationships with their clients, with their partners, strategic partners, and people in their network. And these are relationships that go back, multiple years. Like it's not something that we just met at a networking event last week and now we're buddies. It's like you and I, George, we've been mates since, we worked together at Hub many years ago now. And because you have an alignment in your values, you have an alignment in your perspective. Don't agree on everything, but there are certain core values that resonate. And that's when we talk about community, that's what drives the community, is what are the core values that fit within that community? What is the key objective or key mission that we're all trying to serve as a collective? And then how can we support each other through this period? And that's where we choose collaboration over competition, right? So does that answer the question?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is the definition of community, right? At this point in time, because I think community has been thrown around a lot in various different industries and ways, and people have also gotten confused about, like, especially when it comes to business and marketing, right? Like, what do you mean when you're talking about community? So maybe for people who are listening in as well, because we've got a wide range of people who are listening in. The difference between a community and a network. Would you be able to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So from my perspective, LinkedIn, for example, I'll give you an example that's relevant to where I'm at. I have a network of about probably close to 5,000, if I'm right, contacts on there. But I wouldn't consider them my community. I would, for those who I feel is more community, are people who, like you and the Paxers, that's our mastermind group that we're involved in, but also people who I've known and communicated with on a deeper level. The conversation goes beyond just the business. It goes into, your family and your personal goals, what are your values, people that really resonate on a deeper level. To me, it's a level of depth between network and community, right? So I love that you're showing the pack on the screen here. and that's what it's about. So I know that at any point in time, I can hit up someone in the pack and have a real conversation. Like, hey, I'm going through some tough times. Let's talk about that. Or are you okay? And I don't feel that with a network, it'd be weird if I just went to any random person on my LinkedIn connections and just said, hey, like, how's your health doing? And that's it. And if we haven't had any context and never spoke about that before, it's really strange. And if you talk about Facebook groups and Slack communities and things like that are available, it really comes down to how deep are the connections and how clear are you in terms of the values of the people in that group, and is there an alignment? Because we assume because we're all sitting in the same Facebook group that we have alignment in values, but that's not always true, right? Like you and that's what we saw. I think last year we started to see a lot of these big Facebook groups, 10,000, 20,000 members. The people who were running them started shutting them down. Exactly. And I started to ask, why are you doing that? And they said, because we just felt once you hit a certain number of people, it just got beyond where I understood every single member, where they understood me. It no longer was that. And it became really just a place where people were just spamming each other and not really having conversations.
Yep. And so that, right, the sort of play between the big and small, right? And what I'm seeing now too is that the much bigger players will have a hard time to coordinate. Although China's probably the exception to the rule if you look at just sort of a national standpoint, right? Yeah. And you're seeing also values and belief systems and ideologies between different nations and countries that have impacted their ability to react, right, to the current pandemic. So yeah, like what have been your thoughts and observations? Because I know you've been sharing some articles too about like just the COVID-19 stuff. But the East and West, I constantly see this, like the way that the East has approached this versus the West. What have been your observations around this?
I love that, and it's a great question. Coming from an Eastern culture, so my parents were born. I was born in Laos and spent some time there after my mother passed away, and I actually saw the difference between how communities built, I guess, in the West, and then how we were doing it inside of a co-working space versus how, I went to my father's village, right, where he grew up and his siblings grew up. And I literally saw 20 people building a house together. No one's getting paid. It wasn't a financial transaction. It was, look, you're building a house, we're going to support you. And when it's my turn to build a house, you're going to help me. And it's just like a natural, people knew each other to that level, and we're like, we just want to help each other out because we're stronger as a tribe versus trying to do it on our own, right? And you mentioned China, and something that, regardless of where you lean politically, what I observe, even when it came to light that Jack Ma was a huge supporter of the government over there in China, and it, like, my Western mind goes, yeah, but he's such an entrepreneur and he's an innovator and he's doing all these things. How can he be supporting a system that basically says everyone, the system that controls the country, so to speak. Yeah. But there are, as you say, George, they're actually positioned to win in the sense that there's a strong core belief that resonates through every single person in that country. Now, there's a whole conversation which we won't jump into around control versus programming and all these other things. But it can't be argued that that's stronger than the Australian political system, where we are at this point in time really questioning who our leaders are, and we don't even know who to vote for anymore, and these sort of things are coming up, and in the US as well. This is what another thing that's become, I guess, a benefit from COVID-19 has been the rise of the true leaders, and seeing who is really more community focused versus who is more self-focused. And whether it's local communities or businesses, communities, or whatever it is, we are now looking for who are the leaders that we can believe in, who resonate with our own core values, who are doing the right things. And in terms of the marketing, they're actually putting messages out that speak to us as individuals, and we can see, yep, they're just coming from a good place versus they're opportunistic and are just out there to make a buck. And it's time and place, right? Like if we fast forward 12 months from now, the messaging will change and the economy hopefully is more stabilized and things like this. And then there's a time for a different type of messaging, right? But
Yeah.
I love what you put up here as well. This is really
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah, because this is exactly what sparked like while you were talking, right? It's essentially you're seeing how even our technology is being influenced by the ideologies, right, and the cultures. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this whole point of censorship is kind of interesting because we were coming down this road. I remember I attended a workshop with Roger Hamilton in Bali last year, and one of the slides that he put up was around the trends in society that are going to impact the next 10 years or the next decade. And one of those is trust.
Yes.
Right. And specifically what he was talking about was the lost in trust from particularly the younger generations, the Generation Z or whatever, the millennials or whatever you want to call them. We're now at a stage where a lot of the things that we read online can be fabricated. It can be, you have, someone did a video of I think it was Obama or something. Adobe did a video
deep fake videos.
Yeah. And so you're like, wow, like if I didn't know that was a fake, I would have assumed that was legit.
Yeah.
And so even the content we're reading, right? So there's a lot of Facebook went through a whole period of shutting down, changing their policy to say, look, we're not going to put up with fake news, these sort of things. So yeah, this is the debate, right? Censorship versus free speech. And my thoughts on this is like, you just have to question what's being fed to you, and really do your research to understand where you fit in terms of your belief systems and understandings of things, and just don't take everything at face value. Like even messages coming from the government, like saying, hey, you should be social distancing right now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like we're believing it because yes, we have this big fear of contracting the virus and not hurting our families and our friends and these sort of things. At the same time, who stands to benefit from having everyone stay at home right now? Right. And all these businesses shutting down because they're going broke because we're all sitting at home and not going and not buying products from them. Like I'm walking up and down, when I do my daily exercise and I see the street that I'm on and all these cafes and restaurants and flower shops and things are shutting down. And they've got this sign saying, temporarily closed for coronavirus. The only problem with that is there's the date when we will return. Like no one knows when that's going to be the date, and everyone's just waiting for a message from their governments or their local councils to say, yes, you can go do that now. But as you and I were talking about, George, other things are happening, right? With other organizations right now. 5G is being released all over the world.
Oh gosh, yes.
Right.
Let me bring up
political plays are happening, right? France, who did we hear? UK, who was it? Their prime minister or someone just gone into hospital. So you kind of have to follow what's happening on a global level, and then look not just only at what's happening on a local level, because there are something that you said the other night, which is really resonant for me, was the during times of pandemics and war and great disruptions to the planet, there's also been great technological shifts that have come in at that time, right? So, and the companies that bring in those technologies are the ones that thrive for the next 20 years or whatever, 50 years. And so now we've got to look at who are the people who own those companies, and what's their relationship with governments, because the inner cynic in me, right now will say, I don't fully trust the governments. Like it's been shown and demonstrated, particularly with the US government. I'm not so sure about the Australian government, but certainly the model is pay enough money and we can swing the votes. And that's happened in the US. Like we know the organizations behind the World Health Organization are corporates. They're not, socially driven.
The incentives, right? For them. It's really fascinating because exactly like what you're talking about, and because we've grown up in the West too. Of course, there's Western influences, right, in what we believe, and we stand for freedom. But it's so fascinating being back in Asia. Although technically I didn't really leave because I was in Australia before. Like Australia is just its own. But so now based in Singapore, and in Singapore, right, it has a very unique blend of East and West. And it's probably a good, and in my opinion, like a blueprint for what's possible in the future, right? To take the best of both worlds.
Yeah. So from the Eastern perspective, I wanted to continue the story from Laos is family is huge. Like that's a big innate, spend time with your family. Like that's the thing. Anything you do outside and your work, your pursuits, your passions, whatever it is, it all comes back to the reason why I'm doing it is to support our family and our local tribe. Now being forced to stay home is actually what we've seen is the technology support the rise of connection with the people that matter. Like it comes back to now we're doing, like you mentioned, there's an app there. What was it called? There's a game that people play on it through an app.
House app.
Things like this that are taking off because we're kind of realizing, like the people we actually want to talk to are those people, the people that we love and care about us, and that's who we want to spend our time with, right? And then it makes us question, particularly the entrepreneurs, makes us question, well, why are we doing the business in the first place? Like, wasn't it so we can actually have a better life for us and our families and leave a legacy and these sort of things? And we get so caught up in busy, let's work and hit our goals and these sort of things. And we forget that, hey, there's actually the people that we had always intended to support. They're still there. Like we need to make sure
Sorry. It was, did I say house party, right?
House party. That's it.
Yeah. I think that's, house party. So I'll just bring that up.
Yeah, but that's just a simple idea, man. Like, let's jump on an app together and let's have some fun. Play games, right?
Yep, exactly. I mean, I've already done this with like even my sisters, and it's been good, right? Because it's just a way. Because there was an app before called Heads Up, right? The Ellen DeGeneres one, and they've got that in House Party, which is cool. And I think it's so amazing, right, to see sort of the applications that will rise to the surface right now just due to circumstances. And I guess going back as well to the Greater Depression aspect, and not to depress people, but this is more just to double down on the point that because I see a lot of people also burying their heads in the sand at this point in time, right? They are saying everything's going to go back to normal, everything's going to be fine. Like it's not, And I made this point too in a previous discussion that I don't want it to go back to the old normal, right? The old normal is kind of like what got us to this point. I think we have had it quite good for a while now, especially like our generation, whereby we see a lot of people just taking things for granted. We've become a debt-based society, which just, keeps spending and then keeps printing money now at a freaking national level to prop things up, to keep things going. And, it's no surprise that the fundamentals, we're going to snap back to the fundamentals right now, which is you cannot spend more than you earn, right? And it's amazing that our governments literally like, oh, we're out of money. Okay, let's just print more money.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Oh,
I'd love to hear it.
I think, man, like, and that's the challenging thing, right? Like for me, working in the space that I'm in, and it's like, now for those watching, I do work for an accounting firm. This is not legal accounting.
Advice.
Like this is just an opinion. Yeah. Okay. This is not advice. Go talk to your accountant if you want to deal with the financial ramifications of this conversation. But this is just a personal opinion. I think it is like you, I don't want it to go back to what it was before. I actually feel that I was interviewed on another podcast yesterday talking about this crisis, and the question was raised, like, what do you see as the opportunity here? And I said, really, it's a time for us to take stock as individuals and also as companies to understand what is it, why we're really here, like, and what is it, how can we improve our communities, how can we improve the planet, whatever it may be, and how can we position ourselves over the next 12 or 20 to 24, or, next year or next 2 years to come out as winners. And the only way that I see that happening is if you come from a place of social impact, where you come from a place of an intention is to support ourselves and others, to be in a better place when we come out of this, right? And for those who are more on the profiteering side of things, where it's just like, I'm just going to capitalize and sell a ton of face masks right now and make some money, like that will only get you so far, right? I think, it's really about understanding economics. It's time to learn about these concepts. I mean, like we're literally being forced to understand what does a recession mean, and if we're going through a depression, what does that look like? You know, what has happened in the past, so we can learn from the past, right? Like it's
exactly.
It's a great, I put this on Facebook a couple of weeks ago. It's the best time to get into storytelling and actually asking our elders, you know, what they went through when they went through World War, what they went through when they went through the last depression, the last recession, and how they were able to survive and thrive, and what was the role in community for them. And, you know, like this is also a time that brings these generations together because we're all facing the challenge at the same time. You know, and it's once in a generation when this happens, right? Like we who knows when the next one will happen. And I think whilst you're at home and you're playing games and things like this, like literally get on a call with your grandparents and go, hey man, like I'd love to hear how you dealt with the last depression. Right. And how did that change the narrative? How did it change the direction of our family? You know, because now in our generation, like you, George, you and I, and people who are watching this, like we are in a place where we're going to change the direction of our family moving forward. Right.
I mean, that's such a good point, you know, because I think right now, right, a lot of people are stuck at home, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing is up to the family, but stuck at home with each other. And if, you know, you are stuck with your parents or grandparents, I think that's a great idea. You know, now's the time to get to learn more about them, to learn more about their past, their histories, because, you know, it's sad, even for myself. You know, I didn't even learn much about my father's side until recently when my grandfather passed away. You know, I had no idea about like many of the things during their upbringing. And for those who find themselves at home with their parents and grandparents, you should be taking the time to either, you know, go through the old albums, you know, ask them about, as you said, how they went through the last, you know, either the World Wars or the Great Depression. One thing I saw on Twitter too was that I think it was Rachel from the Community Roundtable. She was talking about how she hopes that you know, her daughter learns maybe some prudence during this next time, because it's true. You know, we become very used to a convenient life, a convenient Western hyper connected life.
And you don't know what you've got until it's been taken away from you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And now it's like, okay, crap, I can't get that. I can't go and do the local meetups that I was doing a month ago. I can't do, you know, go join the local rave or party or whatever it is that your habits were. And now it's like, okay, well, what can I do? And then that's a really good question. What can you do? Well, why don't you write that book you always wanted to write? Why don't you get your thoughts out and get creative and do your art and create your music? You know, find ways to host virtual meetups like you're doing here, George, or we get on and we talk about things together. You know, talk with your family members, really understand the values and the narratives that run through your family system, because like that's going to be the biggest opportunity for all of us. Is this, you know, Mr. Gary Vee out there talking about self-awareness. This is the time to get self-aware. Like this is the time, you know, where you go, shit, man, this is what it's about for me. This is why I'm so motivated to go and do that thing. You know, and then when you hear, oh my gosh, I never knew my grandmother was all about community and, you know, like welcoming the poor when the economy crashed last time and they were just coming and hanging out at a house. I just remember being 5 years old and seeing all these kids at the table. I mean, people at the table, but I didn't know who they were. And then you realize that's because the heroes that we're looking for already exist in our families. Yeah.
Oh man, that's such a good point. Such a good point. And, you know, it makes me think as well, like, you know, because of all these family oriented cultures, you know, it really, community just comes naturally, you know, for many of us, right? And it was funny. I was talking to somebody else yesterday too about how we've become so disconnected that community managers and community builders are a thing. You know, like community management is a profession, right? And we've had to pretty much like teach ourselves and other people how to build communities because we've become so out of touch with it. You know, and like
No, I was going to say, and that's actually, funnily enough, that's actually become challenging for me, which I highlighted, like I mentioned to you, in our past chat was
Mm.
we've got this Slack community where we brought all our clients into it, and they've all joined, or most of them have joined, but they're not engaging, right? And so because first of all, Slack is another channel that they have to jump into because they're already on the socials and everywhere else. And maybe they're not using it internally for their teams. If they are, it's easier for them to come into Slack because they're like, we're already using it. But we have to find a way. And one of our team members said this to me the other day. He said, we have to find a way where it's another channel within their Slack stream where they can just pop into the Bean Ninjas community versus having to open up another tab or go somewhere else. I don't know if you can do that in Slack, but it's understanding the way that these tools work, and then finding like what are the problems, opportunities that you're trying to solve, and then finding the right tools to do that. But before we go into tools and platforms, we have to come back to, well, what's the objective of the community? Why is it there? What would motivate people to join, and then what would motivate people to stay? And those two things aren't always the same, right? And so it's a process of literally what I have to do over the next month is jump onto calls like this one-on-one with each client, each member, and say, what's your goal? Like, what are you working on over the next 12 months? And how can we help you? Like, are you being challenged right now? Like, what's going on for you? Having very real human conversations, and just showing that we care. And it's not about, because I'm trying to upsell you to something. It's literally, no, because we need to understand the best way we can support you and how we can support each other as a community, right? And that's the type of conversation that's important right now.
Yeah, very good point. There's also a danger too, right, in bringing too many people on at the same time, right? Because we were talking about why Facebook changed its mission statement, because connecting the world was one bit, and that's a social network. But then they realized, people, I guess, crave more meaningful relationships. When you move beyond that Dunbar number of 150, it gets very difficult to maintain, any sort of relationship, especially if it's everybody's in one channel. People are going to naturally just start subdividing, going into their own channels. If we're using Slack, or if they're on Facebook, they're going to start creating their own groups, right? Because they want it smaller. I'm just going to share my screen.
I remember go for it. I was going to say, you've seen that play out on an enterprise level when you were doing work with back in the fintech days. So, did you see that, when we're talking about literally hundreds or even thousands of employees, like how do you manage the interactions between those groups, or do they naturally, you split them into channels? Like how does that all work?
It comes back down to teams, right? And that's why wolf packs, why we have the pack, because we understand this. There's like, maybe even if you move beyond like 12 people, people like already start to crave like smaller groups, beyond 12. All right. So what I saw at like a large enterprise scale was that this naturally happened again. People would create their own sub channels for their team. So I think for online, it actually is about creating an ecosystem or experience whereby people can spend a lot of time still with their own teams or groups, smaller groups, we'll call them packs, right? And then they have the option to fluidly move into like larger network update groups and things, right?
To me, that kind of mirrors on a physical level meetups versus conferences.
Exactly, right? Because at a conference, right, there's so many people. And actually, I experienced this when I was in London for a CoinGeek conference for the Bitcoin SV community, or what we call it society now. But, in that, there were so many people that I wanted to catch up with. But because there were so many people, a lot more than the previous conference, I couldn't catch up with everybody. It just literally had to be like, hey, I'll try to catch you later, but wasn't able to,
Yeah.
And that can be a good and a bad thing. Like, it was good in the sense, like, okay, it's great to see the momentum, right? The society is growing. But it also means that people will probably gravitate to their own smaller groups, and I already see that, there's like these cliques, these groups of people who start to hang out with each other already, and then it just comes with the territory. So yeah, I was just going to bring this up because I don't know if you remember, right? There was a social media piece going out about like how the rivers or the canals of Venice were starting to clear up. And then actually they found out that it had nothing to do with, the coronavirus period. And it just goes to show, like, in terms of fake news, like amidst all this, we still have stuff that gets perpetuated and magnified and out of context. And it's just, it just amazes
Trust everything you see.
Yeah, exactly. We really can't. And it was interesting because they went to the source of the person who came up with this. She just said, she put it up and then she corrected herself, but the main post kept getting shared, right? You know, and this is an example of like what's happening right now, and it's also showing like I guess the dark side of our tech. And it's also why like I'm very fascinated in blockchain and Bitcoin, especially because it's supposed to actually assist with some of this of truth verification, right?
Yeah.
And actually, even from a monetary standpoint, like every time somebody would share, they'd possibly earn something. But yeah, what gets shared, if you go back to the source and realize it's actually true or false, then there's reputational damage, right? Potentially.
And on that if we stay on a technology level for a second, I think that's where the opportunity is in terms of economy. So those who are in it for the right reasons, who can really develop that blockchain technology or whatever technology, AI, whatever it is that's coming, and really put it in a place that, you know, if we're going to a cashless society, which it looks like that's what the whole like is happening right now, then what will that look like in 12 months time? Okay. And how do we secure, how do we, you know, deal with privacy? We saw Zoom had a bit of a backlash because people were bombing Zoom sessions. I logged into Zoom today and saw, wow, there's a whole security section that was never there before.
I saw same here.
You know, and you gotta like give people passwords to join your Zoom calls now. And so we're learning about that, you know, and people are taking that more seriously because we want to protect and preserve some level of privacy, you know, within our communication channels and things like that.
Exactly. And I think that's a very good point. Like during this time, privacy we still need to maintain that, because there was actually an article as well that I think it was my sister actually who shared this with me. There was an article about TikTok and saying that we really should be removing TikTok from our phones because a lot of that information is going straight to China, the Chinese government. And they're public about this, right? But it's just that most people don't read, right? Privacy policies and everything, and the amount of information they're taking from TikTok that, like from your phone, actually, that has nothing to do with TikTok itself, is alarming. And so, you know, just literally having TikTok on your phone, I think they have permissions to be able to read, you know, messages going out, and that can potentially go back to the Chinese government. And now, to be fair, right, it's sort of like the Chinese approach. Let me see, Senator something, got Senate bill. Okay, yeah, here we go. Senate bill would ban TikTok from government phones. So I think they've already done this or started implementing this because of what they found. And I think now there's a video going around of like when they're at the courts talking about this. But you know, again, it reminds me too of like Snapchat. They had like similar concerns about Snapchat back in the day, right? Because they were saying, oh, it disappears after 24 hours. Then they realized, oh, the videos are actually not disappearing after 24 hours. And people were sexting like crazy, right, with each other and sending rude snaps and whatnot. So it's inevitable. So I think one of the things too is about there's the tech side, but then there's also ourselves, the personal individual accountability and responsibility, you know? And I think that's important for us to remember especially now as everything is happening, right? We're probably going to download anything that we think is going to help us during this period, right? In Singapore, they had this this app called Trace App. I think it's called Trace App, but it's essentially to help people like track one another and be notified if you come into contact via Bluetooth distance with anybody who has been reported as having COVID-19. Right, which is kind of cool, right? So it allows you to just be aware of your surroundings. At the same time, you also don't know what information they're collecting, you know, about you, and you just kind of have to trust that like they're doing the right thing. The problem is trusting governments in general.
It's a tricky one, man. Like, two movies come to mind if you've got time and you have time to watch movies. 1984.
Oh.
Watch that or read the book. George, what's his name? Orwell.
Yeah. Of course.
George Orwell. And that was written in like the 50s, I remember, I think. And then Contagion is the other one, which
Contagion,
is more to pandemics. But it's all Hollywood and whatever, but just the theories and concepts that they delve into are really interesting. And it comes back to just like paying attention to what's happening, on a micro level, but also on a meta level, and just looking at that and going, okay, what's this really all about? And
Yes.
yeah, that
Yeah, I may
security
watch
piece
this
is
again.
interesting. Yeah, like it's been argued that Generation Y and the millennials don't really care about privacy because everything they put online.
Yeah.
But this is kind of forcing us to question that, and to look at, actually, do I want my data on there, forever, and who has access to it and who can manipulate it and use it in different ways. There's a really good video on YouTube which talks about, I think, I can't remember who produced it, but they talked about retina scans and how we're now using fingerprint to get into our phones, and we're next will be using scanning of our eyes,
Chips in our bodies.
yeah, these
Right?
sort of things, and even facial recognition and how Facebook and the social media platforms are using it. Like, it's really scary when you get into what they can do just by, like, you know how they do that when you log out of your Facebook account, and then you come back in and they say it looks like you've logged on from another location or whatever, and pick 5 pictures, identify who your friends are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like a simple enough process. It's nothing to be afraid of. But when you look deeper into that, what they're really doing is they're basically getting you to verify people's faces, right? And then if it's just you, that's not an issue. But imagine now all 100 contacts or 1,000 contacts are doing that. Now, Facebook are literally building a database of pattern recognition for someone's face, right? And then that data can be sold to governments. It can be sold to whatever it is. So now that when we're moving around the world, and they want to ID people at an airport, or one of your buddies has, someone in your network has committed a crime, and they want to come after that person, they're going to come after you because they have the association is already connected in this neural network that sits in Facebook's database. So it's it's not, things aren't always as simple as it seems. So we've got to
never.
the
Cambridge, we won't go into the Cambridge Analytica stuff, but for those who haven't heard about Cambridge Analytica, please go just Google it. It looks like this: Cambridge Analytica Facebook. Yeah, do some research on that. Very interesting. And I think this is, again, this is also why I found myself in the blockchain space, in the fintech space. Just the idea of, well, if people are just behaviorally going to be putting their information online anyways, can we build a new future whereby at least we can own the data that we put out, and that maybe other companies, if they want to access that, they pay micropayments, right, towards that. That would require an overhaul even of like the internet itself and how it operates. But anything's possible, right? I mean, I don't think anybody realized that this was all going to happen, right? But it has.
And it's only going to accelerate because the technology is getting much more sophisticated, much more faster.
Correct.
So, what's happened in the last 20 years would have taken 200 years to get to this point, or whatever. I'm just putting numbers out there, but we already see, like Tesla and what they've been doing and what they're going to be doing, and other organizations like those are going to come into the mix. Like the next Facebook is going to get to the stage where Facebook is at faster. Right.
Yeah,
and with different technologies or different mission statements and things like that we're not aware of right now. But and it could be one of you guys watching this webinar. Like, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. There's a cool experiment going on in the BSV ecosystem with the guys at Twitch.app. I like what they're doing. Essentially, they've taken the Twitter concept, but Bitcoinized it. So whereby, everybody that interacts with the application, if they like, share, comment, retweet, I think they call theirs branching, then, you're getting paid for all of it. Behaviorally, it changes the sort of how people interact, right? People are incentivized to create more valuable content, meaningful content, if they're monetarily inclined. If they just want to post whatever they want and they don't care about the likes, they still got to pay a micro, payment for it. And then, as stuff gets reshared, right? So because of the way that everything is reshared, you can go back to the source and you can see, who was, what was the source of the reshares or the retweets. But looking at this as well again, and I think we'll probably wrap up, very shortly. But this was, referring to what you were talking about before with 5G, But I thought this was an interesting fact, all right, or at least observation of facts. When 5G is being launched right now, we got COVID-19 2019. 4G launched H1N1 2009. 3G launched influenza in 1998. 2G launched cholera in 1991. 1G launched influenza in 1979. The introduction of radio waves caused the Spanish flu of 9. Now, I don't know if the introduction of radio waves caused the Spanish flu, right? This goes back into conspiracy theory territory, but, it is interesting, right? Because there is always sort of like a technological advance throughout time. And, if there's a correlation between, the sicknesses and the influenzas and what have you, okay, but still, it's not going to help people who are dying right now and any of us. What are we going to do about it, right? We just got to go through it. If anything, I think they're saying that it is kind of building up our immune systems. For those of us who are already used to these phones, we can at least, progress unscathed. But unfortunately for those who, who are dying, and it has to do with this 5G stuff, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of interesting things taking place right now in the world. There was a cyclone in Fiji as well.
Right. Well, we're not going to know, like we won't have, unless you're reading the medical sphere and you have access to direct data, like I don't think we're going to really know the ramifications and impacts. And like you say, George, correlation is not causation. So we don't know that it's because of 5G that COVID happened. Like it could just be coincidence, right? But I think a lot of things point to, if we look back through history and time, some of the biggest winners, on a business or corporate level happened during pandemics, happened during wartime. There's some really interesting stories. There was even one I'm thinking of now was how Coca-Cola benefited from World War II, and how they were selling, their product to the mass audiences, but also selling it, working with the Nazis to work out how to best position a product. They actually launched Fanta during World War II because they couldn't sell Coke because they didn't want to be seen as supporting the Nazi regime. Right.
Wow.
So, so it's interesting, right? So
very, very interesting.
And that's, you could call that a pivot. But it's let's leave it there. I think we can jam into this all day.
Yep. So maybe final thing, we did have a comment from our audience about like we crave good news, and that's an interesting point too around how like we have to also be careful of ourselves and our biases in craving good news. Do we just accept anything we read? That's a danger too. But maybe last thing from your end, what advice would you have that's non-financial, of course, for people right now who are either finding themselves isolated at home, working from home, affected by COVID-19? What's your advice for them?
There's a really good image on Instagram shared by Chase Jarvis, who's from Creative Life, and he did this red image. Anyway, it basically says social distancing. He crossed out social, and then he put physical distancing, social connection. And now, like this point in time, it's I don't know. It's on his Instagram profile, but the point is right now is whether you're home isolated or whatever it may be, really look back at who are the people who have been important to you, in your history, people who supported you the whole way, people who love and care for you, that one there. And then also thinking about who do you want to be surrounded by moving forward? What are your values? What do you care about? Does the work that you do, so if you have a job, be grateful for it, but also think about like, does that job support you and your values and your mission and what you're trying to achieve by being here? Do the people that you surround yourself with normally pre-COVID, all the parties that you went to, like I can tell you back in the day when I used to be a raver, I'd probably talk to one or two of those people. Like I met hundreds of people at the raves and we were all like buddies and things whilst we were there. But like, can I call those people up and say, hey man, like I'm in a bad situation and we should, can we talk? No. Right. Like, and really like understand, on a career level, are you on the path that actually is going to lead you to where you want to get to over the next 5-10 years or even the next 12 months? And then also on a personal level, are you mending things? Are you mending relationships that went sour? You had a breakup with someone, or you didn't talk to your brother for some time. Reconnect and be like, hey, how are you doing? This is a really good time to have those conversations, and come back to the fundamentals of being human. Like, this is what it is.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well said, Anf. Seriously, thank you very much for your time, for joining me on the It Will Come show. Probably the last thing as well is I'll share this. This is from the pack as well. But on Monday, I believe, April 13th, we've got a webinar called Building Resilience During COVID-19. We actually did this for ourselves in the pack last week, and it was very, very useful and productive for a lot of us. And so, yeah, if you're looking for, a way to just take a breather, do some activities, exercises with a group of people who understand productivity, and just see your way through this, I highly recommend this on the 13th, and I'll include the link in the comments.
Can I share a resource quickly too?
Yeah, please.
Yep. So if you go, George, go to beninjas.com/resources.
Ninjas.
So if you are
2 N's?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you are running a small business and you just want some support around your financials and
love it.
through this time, we've got a couple of webinars on there. We've got our course up the top is a free course you can jump into to learn like financial foundations for your business. And so these are things that if anyone wants to jump in there, you can have a look, and stimulus packages and all those sort of things.
Perfect. Yeah, guys, I'll include this link as well in the show notes. And for all of you watching, thanks again for tuning in, and especially if you're going to be watching this in the replay. As always, through patience and persistence, it will come. Thanks again, Ev.
Thanks, George. See you guys.